Hi, my name is Raman Kalyan. I'm on the Office 365 Information Protection team, and I sit on the product marketing side. And I work very closely with Nishan and Deepak and Sanjay and the rest of the engineering crew on driving our vision forward for data governance and compliance across Office 365.
Hi, my name is Nishan Desav. I'm in the engineering team, as Raman mentioned. I've been at Microsoft for about 8 years and about another 15 years in the compliance and ECM space, all the way from Lotus Notes to Documentum to SharePoint and now Office 365. So I think it's time to retire.
Yeah, that's right. All right, this is Nishan's last show, and then it's up to us. No, I've learned a lot from Nishan actually on records management. You know, I didn't actually have a lot of insight into this space, but I started in this group about 2 years ago, and we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in Office 365 in terms of, not only in terms of customers coming to Office 365, but then customers actually bringing more data into Office 365. And with that data, you know, comes more complexity. And so today we're going to cover records management in Office 365. You know, our personas, when we think of personas, like who are the individuals who are actually involved in the records management process? And how do we ensure that those individuals have the capabilities in Office 365 to actually do their jobs efficiently and effectively, right? Then we're going to walk through the records management lifecycle and concept. Whoops. Oh. And then we're going to go through some demos and IW experiences. And we're going to talk about records and transaction systems and our roadmap. Before I get into that, you know, we have seen from a number of customers data governance challenges that they face today in their legacy systems. How many of you actually were in the last session around advanced data governance? A few, not a lot. So when we think about, you know, the challenges customers face today, 45% have a lack of data governance, leaves their organization open to not only compliance risk, but also security risk. And you know, when we think about what is a security risk when we, in terms of data governance, it's about keeping everything. Most organizations, you know, they don't really have a good handle on records management. So what they end up doing is they end up trying to get their end users to actually manually classify information. And that doesn't always work out either because, you know, hey, I go on vacation, I come back, I've got 500 emails. I'm not going to go and try to classify half of those. Or, you know, you churn through your employee base and you got to train new people. And so individuals themselves, it's very difficult, right? And so they end up keeping everything. I actually had a vendor that worked for me, and he was a video guy, and he worked for a large entertainment company in Southern California. And he left there about, it's like 17 years ago now. And they kept everything, actually, even after he left. In the United States, when an employee leaves your organization, you're only required to keep their tax data and any sort of employee data for 7 years. That's the law. After that, you can get rid of it. Well, they didn't get rid of it. They didn't get rid of his information, nor did they get rid of information of 44,000 other individuals that ever worked there. And so when they got hacked in 2004 or 2014, his information and the information of all those other individuals was compromised. And this was information that was social security numbers, bank account numbers, home address, telephone, basically everything you need to have a great identity theft, right? So they got fined by the regulators, and they also had to pay out close to $50 million of lifetime credit monitoring for all these individuals. And of course, they were in the press. And so, you know, when we think about reducing compliance risk, it's really about reducing the amount of data that's in your organization and keeping what you really need to keep, right? And it's the high value data, and that's what records management is about. And so in Office 365, when we think about advanced data governance, which is where the records management capability actually lives, it is really about enabling our customers to achieve organizational compliance by intelligently leveraging the machine learning within our service to help them classify, find, and label the content that's most valuable to them and keep only what they need and get rid of the rest, right? And it's that component. It's taking the burden off the end user and really giving the control to the organization in a more intelligent manner. And so with that, I think what we'll do next is really kind of dive deeper into the records management capability, and I'll let Nishan take that over.
How many of you here are from the IT organizations in your organization? How many of you are from the business side? How many of you have information that you have 365 and you're taking information out into another ECM for records management? Okay. How many are you doing anything with records management in Office 365? Great. Great, great. Thank you for that. So what I'm going to do is spend some time, as Raman mentioned, about data governance, which was our session. If you didn't get a chance to attend that one, please take a look at the recording, because it really gives you the bigger framework from import, governing, and monitoring the data. And now here, inside this framework, there are many, many solutions. And I'll talk about another one later on called access governance. But here, I'm going to spend time talking to you about records management. So one of the things that we believe is that while we can provide capabilities for records management around many traditional systems that we've seen is where you have to drag and drop information and be able to upload metadata. There are some innovative ways we are thinking about how to do this capability and really simplify. So I'm going to spend time showing you simply how we are doing things around even manual classification, and also how we are doing things with auto classification. So in 365, when we talk about data governance, since I have an IT audience here, I'll project this a little bit towards IT. But there's inside Microsoft, before I joined the engineering team, I was also responsible for the records program inside Microsoft, where I worked very closely with our records management team. So there are business aspects, and I'll talk about the different personas. But one thing as IT, you also are the data custodian, right, of Office 365. And so as we bring data in and you're keeping that data, there are very key important things that we want to make sure that we provide capabilities for IT also around records management. And also I'll talk a little bit about the audit trail and some other things around manual disposition process throughout the session. But before I get started on that, I really want to ingrain one concept here, which is about the various personas that we in data governance and also in records management that we want to talk to you about. And I'll walk you through these 4 personas. Why 4, right? One is a compliance manager who may be actually someone who's approving, maybe head of litigation, head of data governance, or whoever is in, maybe the CISO, someone who also may be involved with GDPR. So there is this person who's a compliance officer. Then you have the records manager who may be the one executing the policies, looking at dispositions, etc. Then actual IT manager, who is going to be the person who may be the data custodian, where you are making sure those policies are set up. Because in some organizations, you may empower the records manager to do the entire life cycle of records. But in some other organizations, like more highly regulated and complex organizations with multiple geos, you might say records can do this much, but then IT needs to take over and finish the life cycle. So I'll talk about that. And then finally, really creating capabilities for that information worker, what they have to do. So again, these personas around permissions and roles, these are really important as you think about the whole data governance lifecycle, but specifically around records management. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down to each one of these people for a few minutes so you can kind of look at what we are thinking about from a framing point of view, right? So I mentioned the records manager is the person who's really looking at the corporate retention schedule. What are the capabilities where you can set up these retention schedules and also start tracking what's going on with the retention policies and who's actually taking action. So I mentioned in the previous presentation that I'll make an announcement here about one of the new features that we are deploying since we just released data governance only this April. and which is today I'll be showing you our new Records Manager dashboard so that the Records Manager can see who's actually classifying information, what information actually got auto-classified. So here's where we're giving capabilities to really empower that Records Manager to see what's going on. And also, this persona, I will not talk more about this persona today, but this is going to be really important as you start having multiple policies that may be your regulatory policies that's in your organization or something like GDPR. But here's where we want to give capabilities for maybe before a records manager gets involved, a compliance officer maybe where they set a much more at a higher level beyond records management around e-discovery, DLP, that's data loss prevention, or something like anti-malware, things like that, if there are any specific organizational policies. And a compliance officer can be on the IT side of the house or on the business side of the house. Then, of course, the IT manager itself, where you want to make sure how are you actually managing this information, making sure that there are no interesting conflicts that happen. So one of the scenarios that as we have been deploying the solution, I'm also going to intertwine some lessons learned in my presentation. Some of the organizations that are enterprise said, are you telling me that a records manager can go in and set up a retention policy and delete the data in my service? Yes. That's not going to work for us in a complex organization where there's a lot of data that me as the IT data custodian, I need to have control over that. So some of the feedback we are getting is about making sure that, yes, the records manager can approve a deletion, but the actual kill switch happens with IT because there may be other policies that may be related that that records manager may not see. So these are things as we think about IT, we are going to give a lot more other empowerment for IT to make sure that while we provide capabilities to the business, IT still will have a lot more control of the service because at the end, and I'll keep saying this, you are the data custodian of Office 365 tenancy. And then finally, the information worker, right? So the information worker is where we really want to make sure, and I'll spend some time I'll show you a demo of how we are creating information, how we are creating policies, publishing policies, then also spend some time about what's the experience of that information worker, where they get to look at some of these things around what's getting classified, what's not getting classified, etc. So that's just to kind of recap again the 4 personas, right? So I just want to go back to my slide of the personas, which is around the compliance manager, IT manager, records manager, information worker. And so this is where as we continue to invest in records management in Office 365, and I'll make this commitment now, we are serious about this space. I will show you a slide later on about even the partners who are engaged with us in this area. We will continue to invest because this is really important, not just for records management, the pieces of high value information for business reasons, legal reasons, and for historical reasons. We need to make sure those capabilities are available in our platform. So now I want to, and again, I wanted to introduce these concepts because after I introduce them, when I do the demo, you're going to be able to keep understanding where I'm going with, wait a minute, what's this label here? Who's the persona here? So I just want to make sure I introduce all these concepts first. So one was the persona concept. Everyone's good with that? Okay, great. Second is around this concept that we introduced early this year with data governance called labels. How many of you know about the labels concept? Okay, a couple of them. How many know about content types? Yeah. My kind of audience. Okay. All right. So imagine content types was what we had in SharePoint. And now we expanded this to let this concept of a label be available not only in SharePoint, in OneDrive, in Outlook, in Exchange, and in Groups, and soon to be in Teams, and in Office. Right? So this is where we want it to go across not only in Office 365 or to Azure and also to Windows. So that's why this label concept is really important as you think about what we are dealing with. And I know that some of our colleagues also interchange the word labels with tags. It's the same concept, right? So how you're tagging information or you're labeling information. So, and during the Q&A, if no one asks me the question, I know that's a big question I get all the time about content types versus labels, and I'm happy to take that during Q&A. But again, this is where what we are doing here is around this labels concept. So I just want to do, that's the second concept that I wanted to introduce, where the records manager or the IT can actually create these labels and then push them out to the business to either, we can auto-classify information, or you can let the business user actually tag that information. And this label has multiple triggers. So what I'm going to spend time today is to show you how we are triggering retention, creating a label with retention. So that means whether you want to keep it for this long, you want to do manual disposition, and also if you want to have event-based retention on that label. But that's just the beginning. We are going to be able to expand that label to do other things, and I'll talk about that later, but I just want to make sure that the first concept here around the label that I'm going to be spending time today is the retention piece. And here's just to show you an example of what this looks like in a scenario where you have a contract and you want someone to actually trigger this contract, where you can actually create the label contract, and I'll show this to you in the demo. And then you can actually say, go find anything that says the word NDA contract in a query. That's one way of doing it. Or I'll create some labels and push it out to my business users where they can actually tag it. So the next thing is around life cycle. Do we understand life cycle? Yes. Do we understand exactly how people think about in the traditional way of life cycle? Maybe. Are we going to get there? Yes, of course. And here's where I'll show you what we have today, but I will walk you through probably at the end about some of the other investments we are going to make here. So in this life cycle, this is where now that you understand the information worker, you understand the reviewers and approvers, and these are all the different personas. So here's where you can today create content or import content, and you can apply labels, and then you can classify it. And here's where we can set up labels as records or non-records, and then you can make a decision whether to keep it short-term or long-term, and then go through either a manual disposition or auto disposition. Okay, so that's just to kind of show you the life cycle of records. So what we're going to do first is let me now switch over to a demo, and let me just kind of pause for a minute to give you a couple of stats. So since the release of this solution in April of this year, we have had significant uptick, 30% growth every month of the service. People are taking advantage of some of the premium features of records management and some of the other capabilities. If you want to know the difference, there was in the past presentation, we talked about all the capabilities that comes with Data Governance Core and also the advanced features. And it's interesting to see some of the capabilities that folks are using is around this, where you can actually now set up in one place a retention policy across all the workloads. I'll show you that in a minute. And then I'll show you how you can actually pinpoint to a workload and make a retention policy. So I'll first create this universal retention. Then I'll create a retention policy where we can create multiple labels, and then also show you how we can do this auto classification. So with that, I'm going to hit escape and go on to my demo environment. And great. How many of you know about the Security and Compliance Center? Great. Took 2 minutes away from my presentation to you to ask questions. So inside the Security and Compliance Center, I can come in here to Data Governance. I can go to Retention. Okay, let me do that again. And from here, I can go ahead and create a policy. And let's go ahead and call this 6-month retention for org. And I can very quickly come and say I want to retain it for 6 months. You can also do dates. And very quickly, I can hit next. And I can either do it for everything, or here's where I can actually come and run that policy across all of Exchange. all of SharePoint, all of OneDrive, all of Office 365, all of Skype for Business, and public folders, and soon to come Microsoft Teams. And so here's where you can actually run this policy across everything versus going to SharePoint, going to Exchange, you can run a universal policy. So if you create a 6-month policy, what that means is that if someone goes and accidentally deletes things, now if you tag something immutable, then you're fine. But if accidentally people are deleting stuff, that's where we actually capture it behind the scenes so that the user may think that they're deleting it, but you actually capture it behind the scenes. You as IT administrator can go recover it. So I always encourage folks, I show this scenario, this demo, is you can actually set up a universal retention policy as a safety net for your organization, right? So that's just scenario number 1. Now, I know that we continue to work on this. We have lots of information. I'm also going to be self-critical. That's the best way to give a presentation. And one is, what's the concept of this policy that I created and the concept of labels. So, and I'll come and answer that, but I just want to let you know this policy that I just created, I highly encourage IT to create this versus a records manager to create it, because now this is a policy that's going across everything, right? So just want to kind of make that note about that persona I talked about, that you want to make sure that IT creates any universal policies. So now that I've done that, I want to now spend time talking to you about how you create labels. How many of you know about records managers manage this thing called the records retention schedule? Great. So many organizations have a corporate retention schedule. In a corporate records retention schedule, what you have is some organizations, in my past life, I had an organization I worked for which had 3,200 categories. Most organizations today are looking at actually creating a retention schedule that is about 100 to 200 seems to be the best practice. And it simplifies the taxonomy, simplifies for the business user, but 3,200 is a lot. So just one of the things, if you're in IT, you're working with your records manager, there's a lot of materials about in the space around big bucket theory and best practices. Really encourage, because you as IT, you're going to suffer a heck of a lot if you have to manage 3,200. Now, if you do want to manage that, I will show you some of the capabilities that we'll invest in our roadmap down the road. But here's where you would come in to classifications, and you go to labels, and you create these labels. So each retention category is where you create a label. Now, this is my demo environment. I only have 5. You're like, wow, I have 200. And so there are a couple of things you can do here. If you are familiar, and this is where IT can help automate, someone asked me this question, I think in the last session, is about I have department level retention schedules. I need to be able to pinpoint how I'm going to do that, and do I have to manually do this? So here's where you can use PowerShell to automate this to bring it in, and we will be publishing some documentation how we are doing that internally at Microsoft, so we'll make that materials available to you. So versus sitting there, because I'm going to go through one flow of creating a retention category, but you don't need to sit and do 1, 2, 3, and go through the 200 process. We'll give you a PowerShell script that you can use as a best practice to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a label, and let's call this label NDA contracts. And here, just going to test, give it a description, and then I can turn on retention. So a couple of customers have also asked us, as I went and created this label, I just went and gave it a policy and a description. In a records retention schedule, there are like about 7 must-have categories like citations, department, etc. So that's in our roadmap, how we will give you those optional fields. You can bring it in. So I'll answer that question now. So if you were waiting to ask that question in the later. And also, one of the things, we are working with a couple of partners where there are all these retention engines that are out there. So how we can expose an API or something where they can actually do a lift sheet, hit import, whoosh, come in. So those are some of the things that we are working on. But just want to kind of get that out of the way. We are creating this retention label, but we are working to make sure that it maps very easily to the best practices of the 7 columns that we work on. So now I've given it a name, and I turned on retention, And here's where we have a couple of interesting scenarios, right? So I can come here and say, I like to retain these contracts for 10 years. I can automatically delete it. I can actually go through a disposition review of this label. So what that means is after I create this label, I can say when anyone deletes this information, the records manager gets to actually go through. So this is the first time I'm so happy because I used to be doing a lot of work with Record Center that we are actually, as Microsoft, providing you disposition review, manual disposition review. So that's a very exciting news for us. Now, there's also questions that came up in my past session about what we have shipped recently was where we are giving you this capability, but many organizations have complex workflows. So this is where whether we will go with flow integration or other workflow engines. So that's kind of, we are exploring that, we're listening to the feedback, giving you back the flexibility for manual disposition. But just want you to know that this is our first step at manual disposition review. So I can basically give it a name of a person, or you can give it a group of folks who will review that manual disposition and then go through it. And there are these triggers which are created, last name, or modified. So I'm going to say labeled. And I'll come back later on and show you some of the new capabilities around event-based in a minute. I also can classify that as a record. So this means that if they classify that as a record, that document, that means that if they try to delete it, they won't be able to delete it. Right? It's immutable. And I basically create that label, and then I get to publish that label to the various workloads. So very important scenario here. So you can actually, in a very complex organization, my recommendation is let the records manager create the labels, and the publishing capability should be IT, making sure it doesn't disrupt some of the work, because this is just a recommendation, but in some of the organizations we work with, the records manager comes and creates it and publishes. But again, it's all about the tension or the love, I call it, between IT and records, right? But we are going to give you the flexibility. We cannot get into the political battle in your organization about that. Right? That's for you to solve. But just to let you know, we are giving you the flexibility to figure out whether IT will do this work or whether it's records. So here, I've created this label, and now I can come and publish that label or auto-apply that label. So what I'm going to do first is to keep the flow going is now let's assume, because when you publish this label, it takes about a day because our priority to publish these labels versus imagine in the service, there are many things running. So our SLA, we say it's about a day. And so just imagine that I published these labels that I created. So there are a couple of labels that I've created in the past to show you, which is called final marketing files, press, etc. So these are labels that I've created, and I've published these labels. And so what I did was I actually came and published this marketing department labels, those 4 labels, into all of Office 365. Okay? So what I'm going to show you next is, now that we've created these labels here, so I went and did the creation, I published the labels. Now let's go take a look how those labels actually look inside Outlook first. Then we'll go into Groups. Then we'll go into OneDrive. Then we'll go into SharePoint. Okay? Anyone fallen asleep yet? We're good? Everyone good? All right, good. All right, let's go. So I know there's a lot of presentations at this session, so I'm going to try to keep it as fun and punchy as possible. So here is in my Outlook inbox. I can go into my inbox, and here's where if we created that universal policy, that's where it kind of cloaks the entire service. And when I publish those labels, now those labels actually show up here called assign policy. So here you can see those labels, press files 5 years, final file 7 years. So these were the 4 labels I published. So now those labels are available in place for that business user to tag. So you can have a default policy, and I'll talk about the 3-zone here, right? Many organizations have something called a 3-zone policy. For my Exchange server, I want to make sure I only have 120 days worth of email. Done, right? So you run that universal policy. Second, I want to be able to tell the business user or the information worker, I'm going to give them a folder called work in progress. And in that work in progress, I want to apply a folder where I can actually apply a retention. So you can apply a label retention policy for a folder. So here I have applied a 2-year. So here, when the business user is there, I can drag and drop an email into that folder. And here I can go into work in progress, and you can see it inherits that 2 years. Zone number 2. Zone number 3, in your inbox, if you want, you can basically let the person tag the various labels that you publish. And so now you have the Exchange server, whether it's 90 days or 120 days, a 2-year working files, and then you can tag information there. Now, a guy who's coming from the world of Documentum and every other thing, drag and drop emails, this question comes up all the time, so I might as well ask that question right now. So our whole concept here is to keep information in place. Now, the moment you take an email that it'll be a custodian space and you tag something as a record, it becomes a non-custodial email because now we are giving access to the records manager and whoever else the permission that the label has. So our goal is to keep the data in place and give views because now we are in the cloud. And I know this is a tough concept because we have always been working on this traditional concept of move everything into one bucket. Imagine if I started drag and dropping chats from Teams or Yammer conversations into SharePoint, it just becomes really kludgy. So we are looking at how we can give the information maker view of when they classify information or auto-classify what they see and what the records manager sees. And I'll show you that in a minute at the end, when I talk about that records manager dashboard. Just want to let you know, here in email, you have the capability to drag and drop the email still in Exchange for a working folder, and you classify the information in place in your inbox. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go to a group. So very similar to how I showed you in this group. So now you can apply retention into an entire group, one container. So here in this container, I can also apply that same policies that I propagated across SharePoint and that shared mailbox. A shameless plug. I'm going to be talking about data governance and groups on Friday morning, and there's another announcement we'll make there that might be excited for folks who like drag and drop. So I'm just going to let you hang in there for a minute on Friday, but we'll have an entire session. I'll talk with one of my colleagues from the groups team, how are we governing data governance and Office 365 groups as a concept. So this is just to show you how you can also apply labels into a group. The third one I want to show you is I can also apply labels to OneDrive. So here's where those same labels will show up here. You can actually apply these labels into OneDrive. I'll be spending a little bit more time with SharePoint. So this is a SharePoint document library, and where I can actually apply labels into the same document library. But let's do this. Why don't we upload a document? So one of the things I've done here is in the SharePoint library is I have actually gone in. How many of you are SharePoint crew here? Oh, love it. Look at that. So I just went to document library settings, and I can actually set up a default label for the library. So here, I've already set it up as 2. So here, you can actually say by default, now going back to that 3 zone, you can say every time a SharePoint site gets created, I want to apply a 2-year working documents label. So that way, in 2 years, or if your organization says, I want those SharePoint sites gone in 6 months, your choice, not mine, right? So you can decide however you want to set up various labels. Here, you can actually set up default labels for document libraries. And then any label that they actually classify, those actually can be records, right? So just different options for you to think about here, right? So here's where we do that. And then And I'll come and show you some of the new capabilities that we are doing around this area, around also folder level and document sets in a few minutes. But I just want to kind of show this to you here is very quickly how I can have labels. And if I were to, let's go ahead and upload a document. And let's look at, you can see my fascination with OCAs here. So I upload this document here, and by default, that document got the label working document. So that way, again, trying to simplify as much as possible for the user. Behind the scenes, things happen, right? So just to kind of show that capability here. And now that I've shown you Outlook, Groups, OneDrive, SharePoint, I'm going to go back into my slide deck for a minute and show you some capabilities around some of the new things that we are releasing in the next few weeks around SharePoint. And this is where you can also now apply a label to folders, right? Lots of feedback on that one. So, and it inherits. It inherits. So here's the thing. If you had that working documents across the entire document library and you gave it a record a label, then any documents underneath that will inherit. Because yesterday someone was talking, man, when are you going to fix that thing? I said, it's happening. So just want to let you know that was a big, and I want to congratulate Sanjay, who's in the audience with me, who actually worked on this capability. So very exciting that you'll see this coming to the service within the next few weeks. And we were hoping it will be ready by today, but like I said, just give it a couple of days or a week or two, it'll propagate to your tenancy. The second thing is around document sets. Yes, we are going to be able to apply a label to document sets. So for case management, project management, done. It's coming, and that will also be there in the next few weeks. And finally, come on. One document at a time. Seriously, guys? Microsoft? Yep, done, right? Multiple documents you can click and be able to then apply a label to them. So multiple clicks. So just want to let you know some of the other things that we're working on. Sanjay, did I miss anything? Yes, we are also going to be applying retention on OneNote. Big ask from customers that we'll be also working on is for OneNote. And I'll talk more in the roadmap about what we're doing with Teams. So now imagine what I showed you where we created that label, and now we were able to create this label and put it into Outlook, to OneDrive, to SharePoint, Groups. But we know people actually live in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, right? So are the people going to really go tag stuff in SharePoint and OneDrive? Maybe. Or we can do auto classification, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But where people live, so imagine if we can actually show you the label in Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And imagine if you just tell them it's a confidential document or a restricted document, and behind the scenes retention labels are happening, so they don't even go retention shopping, because if you publish 4 labels to a business user, they're going to pick the 30 years, not the 6 months. Right? So imagine that you don't show the retention schedule, right? You just don't show, you just say, you know, high value document or whatever the classification you have. And imagine that you can not only create that label, start putting some protection capabilities to that label. Where you are now doing retention policies, you can also do protection. If they classify something highly confidential, immediately we run a DLP policy and we encrypt it, right? Imagine you can do that. And then also, my favorite, imagine we can do watermarking on those documents, and also behind the scenes we have this label, and also do hierarchical file plans. That is what we are talking about with something that we announced yesterday called Microsoft Information Protection. So this is where we are able to give you the same capabilities that we had, and taking all that capability and also showing you how we can take this label concept and add all these other capabilities. So please, 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 if you get some time, I have one of my colleagues called Alex Lee talking about MIP, and you'll hear about this around Microsoft 365. Microsoft Information Protection is what we did because the customer kept on telling us, we are confused, Microsoft. You have all these labels that we can do in Word, Excel, PowerPoint called Azure Information Protection, and you in Office 365 have labels. We brought this together. That is what Microsoft Information Protection is. Amazing win for all of us in the records world, because now you can create these labels, push it. While you will have all those capabilities that we have, what I showed you with MIP, you can now bring these labels and push them on to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and beyond around even Box, Dropbox, and other things. So we go beyond Office 365 with this labels concept to on-premise, hybrid, or in the cloud. So that's just to kind of like walk you through labels. So now what I want to do is go back to my demo environment and show you a little bit around. We talked about the creation process, we talked about the collaboration process, and now I want to spend time about disposition. So when I created that label, as you recall, and I'll try to do that again here, just to show you framing back, I want to show you how we created that label. We had manual disposition review. Everyone remember how we did that? Right? So and here I can go ahead and create this label, and here's where I showed you manual disposition review, right? Trigger. So what we do is, if you do have those triggers, what happens is you can actually come in to the data governance dashboard, and you can go to dispositions, and anything that's coming up for disposal will start showing up here. So this is your pending disposals. So what we shipped is for OneDrive and SharePoint, very soon for email, right? So here's where you can see, and you can filter them by completed and pending. And I just want to let you know, and then all the different labels you have. So you have all these capabilities. You can pivot to see all the manual dispositions we did. But we are also going to continue to imagine some of the things that we want to work on here is to really start doing conflict checks, because we understand the signals. We understand how ML can help here. With machine learning, we can do a lot more. So there's a lot of exciting things that we are looking at. You'll hear us talk about defensible deletion, defensibility, because many people, as we take information in, it's more important to get rid of information. Many organizations are talking to us about, I want to bring it into 365 just to get rid of it, because I want to have a defensible deletion process, because I don't know what to do with all this junk, and I only bring the high value data in. So that's one of the things as part of our import process, to see how we can do defensible deletion if you are merging with another company or divesting a company, to go through that process. So this feature, keep a lookout for this feature. Will continue to grow, and where we will invest. Another feature that we have is, when we create a label, is you can actually we announced this week, is in the label. And by the way, that environment I showed you earlier was actually just a regular environment. Everything I did so far, you were able to see, except those screenshots I showed you what's coming within the next few weeks. But here's where another one I want to show you. In the same label, when we had retention turned on, I was able to actually go here and trigger an event. And what this means is that many organizations that are in multiple verticals, have complex business processes, they have triggers of events that trigger the retention. And that means actually whether it is in your HR system, your matter management system, your contracts management system, your financial system, those triggers are what we need to bring here to start propagating event-based retention. So we released this, we are in preview, so anyone who wants to join our preview, there's something called the Universal Preview Program. You'll be able to take and give us feedback on this. But here's where you can actually say, create an event, and after you create the event, there are triggers. So there are two things we are doing here. You can create the event inside Office 365, where you can actually manage the whole event trigger process there for data in there. And the other one is actually working with a partner. or working with a third party to help you connect. Now, if you have internal IT folks to do this on your own, you can, because the way that we're providing the APIs and the commandlets for you to do it on your own. But I like to bring on stage Brad Teed from Gimel to show you what they have done to connect transactional systems records and connecting to our data governance consoles for those triggers to work.
Thanks, Nishant. Let me switch over to my demo here. So I want to run through a couple of scenarios. First, let me introduce myself. My name's Brad Teed. I'm the CTO of Gimel. And Gimel produces governance, compliance, and SAP integration software for Office 365. So I want to run through a couple of scenarios, and Nishant went through that whole information lifecycle. He talked about creation and managing the information all the way through the disposition process. And so the scenarios that we're going to run through very quickly is a couple of different ways of how information gets in, but also ending up in that event type of trigger. So I have an Office 365 tenant here. It looks a lot different than those that you might be spinning up. It's actually leveraging some of our usability enhancements. But what we've done is we've integrated Office 365 with SAP. And so every piece of information that we're putting and loading in, either from SAP or from Office 365, is being stored in Office 365. So this particular user has taken a document off of their My Documents area, is uploading it into a drop zone or a hot area on the front page, and they're just getting prompted to put in an employee number. So they're not populating a whole bunch of information. They're essentially tagging the information with us that this applies to a specific employee. Now, this is on the front page of their team site in Office 365. So it's uploading at this particular point into 365, and because of some of the integration capabilities we have with SAP, it's actually storing it in the correct location. It's populating metadata from SAP and placing it in the correct library and applying that label that Nishant told you earlier in his presentation. So here we see some of the initial properties being displayed. In the properties panel, we'll see a number of other properties that have come in from our SAP environment. Now this is a certified solution with the SAP archive link, and we're bidirectionally updating the metadata. So you can see all the properties that have SAP, those are coming from our SAP environment, and we have additional properties that we've added to the information as well. Now, moving over to the next example, so down here at the very bottom, I have a file system, and then on the left-hand side, I have my OneDrive for Business synced to my local PC. And this happens to be an area where I'm uploading new HR documents. So in this case, I'm going to upload a resume. Now what we've done is we've integrated, using Flow, we've integrated OneDrive for Business to create a flow. It's monitoring that particular OneDrive for Business folder, and it's actually going to send an email to the HR processing person that this resume has been updated. And what you'll see is now that we can go in and we can actually see the resume, in the right-hand panel here, we have a different way of actually saving and classifying the information. This is generated from Flow, and the user, that HR processor, all they have to do is link it as a resume to the employee file. So very simply, no properties, no typing, click on it, and what has actually occurred is, again, we're storing that information in Office 365. The properties have been synchronized with the SAP employee item, and here we see that the item got added. It's being put into a different location for the personnel career management area, and then we'll take a look at the properties. And those properties as well have been updated from our SAP environment. Now get ready, because the exciting part of the demonstration is coming up next. So for those, who has SAP in the room, in their organizations? Okay. So this, as you may or may not know, this is the SAP interface, which is probably the most exciting interface that you'll see all day today. But people that operate in SAP, they're operating and they're very focused, they're transactional based, and they're updating the information. Now the key here is we don't want to segregate the information from Office 365 and SAP. We want people working and being productive. So this person that's in this interface all day long working in HR, they have access to all that information that we just stored. Here's the information that we just loaded. Here's a personnel day change record. They don't know that information is Office 365. The information is accessible directly from their SAP interface. Now what we want to do now is we want to go in and create that transaction that Nishan was talking about, where we're actually going to cause a business event to occur. So I'm in the personnel area, and what we'll see is this person is actually processing, we want to process some data, but they've gotten the notification that this person has resigned. And so they have the actual termination letter that that person signed, and we want to upload that into our SAP environment. So this is somebody that's operating in SAP. They go into the employee record, they select that particular separation document, and we upload it. This is just a standard SAP process, but because SAP is now integrated with our Office 365 instance, we can create cause and effect business processes without having to change anything. So we save that. Now we jump back over, we'll see that that employee termination has actually been loaded into Office 365. We've updated the additional metadata that we needed to. And then, as we jump back over to the Security and Compliance Center, what we'll see is because that was an employee termination document, we'll see that the event has actually been triggered in the Security and Compliance Center right over here. We refresh this, and then we search for that particular employee, which I believe is 801, and we'll have that event being automatically triggered, and then over here on the right-hand panel, we'll see that that was for a specific employee. So the key here is that now we've increased the productivity of the HR processor, but also we're attaching the appropriate retention and the events to the information in Office 365.
Great. Thanks so much, Brad.
Nishan.
As you can see, that it's really exciting for us to think about what we are doing with data governance and records management is really not only looking at managing this unstructured data, also managing structured data. So one thing, now I'm going to go back into a demo and show you how we can create a label, and let's do some auto classification, right? So let's go ahead and create a label called Killer Whale J2, and then I'm going to say retention on, and I'm just going to hit the defaults, and then I can actually go ahead and create an auto apply this label. So here's where I can actually auto apply this label with, there are sensitive types. I'm not going to go into this, but there is a whole sensitive types where if you want to go apply this label to social security numbers, to PII data, if I have a few more minutes, I might show this. Heck, what, we'll just show it. So here is where I can go into privacy, and I can go and pick PII data, and here is when I pick that, it tells you, let's go and pick US Patriot Act. And here's where through machine learning, we are looking at information of your passport number, SWIFT code, et cetera. So here's where you can look at various privacy. So, and I'll talk a little bit in a roadmap about how we are doing for GDPR. This is machine learning signals where we can actually auto apply. Remember I talked to you about all those labels and intelligence. Here you can now take a label and apply to already default templates. This is what we ship. You can also customize this today. It's a little, you have to do a little bit of scripting to do that, but we are working on also something called custom fingerprints, where if you have your own form, you can upload it where through machine learning, where we can actually map it and then apply retention policy. So that was not the demo I was going to go with, but at least I wanted to take a minute to show you some of the cool capabilities that we are working on. But here's where you can also come in and auto apply you can run your own query. So if you want to just go find NDA contracts that are purple and green, you can write queries very similar to how you ran queries in eDiscovery, right? So just think about that here. You can actually write a query and then go through the same process of naming something and able to identify the locations. So you can run a custom query across the entire service, or you can run it in OneDrive, SharePoint, or in Exchange. So just think about that. Auto apply is it's one of our premium features, but it's really, really important for you to look at how you can do auto apply sensitive type. And you can set up the different thresholds, or you can write your own queries. I know that one person asked in the other session about, hey, I have information that are in content types in an older environment, and here's a way you can write a query to map content types to labels. You can actually write a query for that. But we are working to also automate that process in the future about making it simple for you about mapping content types to labels. But today, you can actually write that custom query. So that's just to kind of do a quick recap, and I'm going to now show you what I've been waiting for, which is now we created all this stuff. So I can go into my data governance area, and then I'm going to show you something that we are shipping soon, which is called that Records Manager dashboard. So here's where I can come and take a look at who tagged the records, who didn't tag the records, who are the top people who are tagging the records. So really started bringing that insight into. So this is what is really exciting is now whether it's the IT administrator or that records manager can come and take a look at what was actually manually classified and what was done that was auto-classified. So you can take a look at that capability here. And then let me show you one more view. Here you can actually drill it down into the various types of records that are going on. So here, imagine very quickly you can come in and take a look at the various capabilities that you have, and you can also filter these according to, I want to look at how people are tagging information in SharePoint, OneDrive. So really giving you that insight into those records we have. Okay, come on, I need a little clap for that, right? Okay, all right. So this is because we shipped all these features like, okay, everything's going on, what do I do? And we had to go to the search scope and write tags to get this information. So we're really making it super easy for you to come in and see this capability in our Records Manager dashboard. So that's just to kind of show you what we're doing with the dashboard, and we'll continue to invest there. A couple of other things that we're doing, keep a lookout for this area where you have this dashboard concept, and we'll continue to invest. And really, one of the things we can do a better job in really bringing all this information together. So one area is because workflow is becoming very important to us, we're looking at how does workflow and task management partnering with some of our other products to bring it all together. So you'll see bringing more coherence just into, because you're like, we had to go to do policy here, we had to go do this here. So we're really going to simplify it. But one other capabilities that I want to show you here is that you can set up those auto classification intelligence in the system, where this system is telling me today, by the way, I found some tax document in your environment. Would you want me to create a retention policy? So those are some of the recommendations we already have. But imagine that we're going to continue to give you some suggestions saying, by the way, we know that you're part of a pharmaceutical organization, and in this area, we also believe there are some other policies that may be relevant to you. Would you like to apply those policies to your service? So this whole policy concept, we really want to take it to that next level. Okay? So I want to go back to my slide deck and kind of give a shout out to a couple of partners. We already saw what Gimmel's doing in this area. We've been also partnering with AppPoint, and they've been doing some great work about what they do in the on-premise world, hybrid world, and cloud, really taking advantage of all the capabilities that we've done to bring this all together. The other one is RecordPoint. So RecordPoint's another organization that's doing around on-premise work, cloud, and beyond Office 365. So really working with partners who are embracing our records management capabilities in data governance to be the parent, and for them to help other information be able to bring it in and control. So that's kind of how we're thinking about the console of Office 365's data governance capabilities. So with that, I'm going to walk to a roadmap. So here are a couple of things that we are working on. I mentioned to you about event-based retention, and that's going to be in preview soon. Retention on Microsoft Teams is absolutely one of our top priorities, and we will be shipping that within the next few months. And that means you can enable retention across everything inside Teams. And then I mentioned you about, which is a big announcement here, is around Microsoft Information Protection, which is around these labels that will propagate across, not only from Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Groups, Teams, but also to Office and beyond, on-premise, hybrid, and other third-party solutions. Access governance. I have a little bit of time. I'll show you a quick demo of this here to just show you. A really cool capability is we are taking what you already are as an administrator knows about what's going on with permissions of a site. But imagine if we can take that same capability in a site and also look at what's going on with the users. So here's a feature called access governance, where you can actually look at what's happening in a service. I'll give you the scenario we're working on. If a CFO in your organization or someone is working on an M&A document and they've over-provisioned that person to have 50 people on that site, you're like, well, if this is confidential, how did 50 people have access? Because someone accidentally put a group in it, right? So where we can detect that and immediately tell you, we found out this was a sensitive document in here. We realized that why would you have 50 people over-provision this site? So where we immediately notify the IT administrator to either block it or restrict it till you get approval. So just to kind of like getting data leakage out. So look for us to work on this. Access governance is a big area that we'll continue to invest on. And then the other part is around GDPR. So this is an area where imagine all the things we have done with e-discovery and with the security and compliance and with data governance. We have a huge opportunity to create a dashboard to look at all the data, what's going on in your service, specifically then to help you with the data subject request. We as Microsoft have a great opportunity here to really embrace and help our customers with GDPR. So you'll hear a lot what we're doing in this area. I encourage you to go listen to my colleague Deepak Ramaswamy talking about GDPR at the conference. And if you don't listen to him, make sure you at least check him out on the web, because all these sessions are recorded. Really, really important one. And then finally, we are also working in the last session, we talk about this investigations capability with forensics, with supervisory review that we continue to invest in. And then finally, the records manager dashboard that you saw. So with that, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Thank you so much for the time today. And I really appreciate you still not falling asleep in my presentation and listen to things lovely about records. Resources, tons and tons out there. So make sure you check out these resources. Thank you so much.
Got a question?
Questions? Can you please come to the mics if you have a question? Yes, Sanjay.
So you guys demoed some great capability for folders and multi-select labeling. Does that work in OneDrive as well as SharePoint?
The question is, does multi-select labels work in OneDrive? The answer is yes.
Yeah, it was already plain silly that we didn't have the basic multi-select capability, and it would be even more silly if you just had it for SharePoint. So OneDrive is included, yes.
So my question is, with regard to applying like label policies, like auto-applying those to organizations, you and I kind of talked about that in the last session. Can you kind of talk about how you guys do that? I think you mentioned PowerShell, because we want to be able to apply specific labels to HR, legal, accounting, whatever.
Great. So a couple of things. What you have today is we have this one unified interface for the labeling, but as MIP comes into place, Microsoft Information Protection, that label piece, we know that we need to invest there. And really what we are working on in our roadmap is very similar to a records manager, to have a little bit more of a console there, to not only the records manager dashboard of what happened, but also creating that capability to say, I want to publish these to this department, this department. So that's a roadmap item today. But unfortunately, if you want to do that today, you have to use some PowerShell to automate that process. I'm working on publishing that PowerShell out on the web. So when this gets posted, we'll make sure there's a couple of documents we're working on. A white paper from how we do records management inside Microsoft is one, and then the other one is around the PowerShell to automate the retention schedule.
A couple of things. When you set the label, and you marked it and you said, hey, this label is going to be for records.
Yes.
Does that, at that point, does that label become frozen where all you can do is you can no longer edit that label, you can only delete it? Is that correct?
So yes.
Okay.
The short answer is yes. But we've heard different things from different customers. Some customers are evaluating the platform. Some others are reacting to changes in their business environment. And so they do want some flexibility in terms of how they can react to such changes in the environment. So some customers are saying they do want the labels to be frozen if it's a record label. Others are saying they need some flexibility. So we're still kind of deciding which way to go.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up. On a retention rule, is there a way today, or is it coming on the roadmap to be able to say, I need this retention rule for these people? Like, I know you can do it for Exchange.
Right.
But when you go in there and set it for 10 people in Exchange or whatever, those same 10 people don't cascade down through the other areas. You have to go in and individually, right? It's like each area has to have its own criteria.
So today you have to look at it from a product perspective, so SharePoint or OneDrive, but it's really the user pivot that we should be looking at. So if you say, okay, I need to be looking at people in this specific department, that would automatically include their mailboxes, OneDrive accounts, any Delve activity, and so on and so forth. Yes, that's a roadmap item for next year.
Yep. Question. By the way, I'm not ignoring you. I have another presentation again in another 15 minutes. So that's why Sanjay, who's one of our program managers, will answer the questions.
I can be there.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. You demonstrated all of this in the online version. Can you use labels in the desktop version of Outlook and Word, and not OneDrive obviously unless you sync it, but can you use it on the desktop versions?
So the Office 365 label platform is exclusively for the online version.
Okay.
That being said, we are doing some consolidation work with Azure Information Protection. They have their own set of labels which works with clients today.
Okay.
And so sometime next year, we will have cross-platform, cross-client support for labels, irrespective of whether you're using an online client or an offline.
So
And that's the piece that I showed you earlier about bringing that label, and when I talked about MIP, and that's where we'll go. So we are like in our colleague session today, we'll actually show those labels working on a Mac, but that will ship early next year.
Okay, so if we wanted to implement labels, we'd have to educate our users to go and apply those labels through the online versions of Word and Outlook.
It depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're looking at labels to drive controls around protection, encryption, and sharing, then you would need to use Azure Information Protection labels, and those are available for clients today.
Yeah, no, it's just purely for records retention.
Okay, yeah, so then it has to be online only at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Quick question. Mentioned everything in that but Yammer.
I thought I was got it going.
So, great question. So Yammer today is supported via third parties like Actians, Globanet, 17A-4, and so on. But that's not a great story because Yammer is essentially a Microsoft property. And so next year, we will have Yammer, LinkedIn, LinkedIn for the matter is in the same boat. LinkedIn and some of the other new products like Stream and so on and so forth, all rolled into the Security and Compliance Center. So next year is where we're looking at a lot of those things coming together.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question regarding like a content type hub. So we have like an old system that we have implemented, in the old way in Office 365 based on the content types, right? So we created like different content types for our business functions, and now those content types get published through Content Type Hub. Now labels, do we have to rework to transfer that logic into labels, or?
So you can continue to use content types we want to make sure that those continue to work side by side, especially because a lot of customers have invested in that, regardless of whether they're using on-premises products or the online versions. That being said, we have received a lot of requests from customers who are migrating to the cloud equivalents to facilitate some sort of a migration path moving forward. So we're going to have both the side-by-side story as well as the migration capability.
Okay, so basically, good thing is to transfer it to labels.
Correct.
Thank you.
So just a quick question. I think I noticed that the groups portion, you mentioned that at a groups level, retention will be applicable only at the groups level, not at individual documents level. Is that true?
So we're looking at groups as a first-class citizen, like a logical container. So anything that's included as a part of a group would be covered. So that would be the corresponding team site or the corresponding mailbox. So we are not treating them as separate entities anymore.
But would that be a blanket retention?
Yes.
Not at an individual document
No.
and individual library? Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Now, that being said, if you want to explicitly set specific classification labels on individual documents, you can always do that.
Okay.
But so you have the different.
And what would supersede? Do we have the ability to?
Explicit always overrides.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Oh,
Yes.
who's next? All right. Yeah. Hi. I have a question about delegated administration of labels. So let's say I have 5 different divisions. Each division has its own set of records managers, and each one should manage their own set of labels.
Right.
Is there a way to support that?
Not today, but with MIP and access governance, next year we will have the ability to do so.
Okay.
So you will have the ability to say a department is the jurisdictional boundary, or a geographic region is a jurisdictional boundary. So those capabilities will light up next year.
Okay. One other brief question. If I have, let's say I have different data classifications. Okay, I want to label my data from a classification standpoint, and I also have a number of different record categories, like 200. In order to implement, and a document can only have one label. Do I need to multiply those out into all the different combinations?
So today we only support one label on a document, but again that's changing with MIP because that's very, very limiting. So we will have multiple label support. We will have hierarchical label support. All of that will come up with MIP next year.
And the roadmap for MIP is?
The roadmap for MIP is a lot of it will start showing up by the end of this year. But some of the clients, where we're talking about actual Office clients which require deployment, they will take a bit longer. Those will likely show up in H2 of next year.
Thank you.
Second half of next year.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I have actually 3 questions.
Sure.
The first is about the retention years or retention period. Right now there is just one value possible per label. So I know there are certain restrictions where those retention periods should be based off a country. So the same contract may have a different retention for one country than another. Is there a way, other than creating a combination of country per label category, which would be a huge number, to deal with that?
Yeah, it's similar to the other scenario where you have this department boundary. So today, unfortunately, you have to multiply those out per your requirements. But next year with MIP and with access governance, you'll be able to say, I have this security filter criteria where I have a boundary either based on a department or a region, and have that drive your classification schedule. So that's coming next year.
Okay, but I guess that still wouldn't allow the user to say within one group that document is a contract affecting this particular country.
Yes. So today, no, we don't have that capability.
Okay.
So today what you can do though is you can define labels with custom queries where you have very definitive ways of identifying content to a specific country, and then use that to drive your classification schedule.
Okay, but the number of auto-classi...
Yeah, but you'll still have to have all of those different classification labels set up.
Okay, but the number of auto-classification queries, I think, is limited, so it's probably not a solution for a large number of labels.
It is limited in what sense?
I think you can only create about 100 or so auto-classification labels.
I am not
Or-
aware of such limits. If you are running into such limits, I'm very curious to know why.
Okay, okay.
So I can follow up. If you can send me an email or something, I can follow.
Okay. Yeah, the other question I had is there a way to enforce mandatory labeling?
Yeah.
Because we expect our users to
Right.
apply labels, and if you
Right.
just
But
make that
yeah,
optional,
totally
it
fair
won't work.
question. Not today with Office 365 labels, but with MIP, yes, we will have that.
Okay, and last question about MIP.
Yes.
I talked to the person at the booth yesterday, and I learned, or they confirmed my expectation, if you are encrypting a document, it's encrypted before it's actually stored into SharePoint, so that'll imply it won't be able to be leveraged into search. Is that limitation going away anytime soon? Because we don't want users to upload documents and no longer find them because they're encrypted.
I don't have a great answer for that one. If you can quickly go into the opposite room, there's
Okay.
a session going on right now, I think on MIP, and they might be able to answer your question more accurately.
Okay.
Otherwise, we can hang on with me for a few minutes after this
Sure.
session. I can go find that person to answer.
All right, thanks.
Hi. My question is on SharePoint. So I apply label to a SharePoint folder, right?
Okay.
And I sync offline.
Okay.
So when I'm not connected to the internet,
Yeah.
so still there is an ability to show the labels on the offline downloaded documents?
No. So today, like I said earlier, the Office 365 labels work only in the online environment. But with MIP, any classification that you apply on a document will actually travel with the document, regardless of whether it's within your organization or if it's leaving the organization. So those are some of the benefits that we are going to accrue out of the consolidation work we're doing with Azure Information Protection. So that one should be available by the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It will travel with the document.
Okay. Thanks.
That's MIP, you say?
MIP, yes.
MIP.
Yes, yes.
Hi.
Yes.
I just got a quick question. If you're, in the case you have a label that you've indicated that it is a record, and users in Exchange or OneDrive have, I guess, classified some of their documents, and they've left the company. To my understanding, you can't delete those files. Is that a case now that they can't clean up necessarily that user's email, or sort of clean up the OneDrive, or is there a facility to pull those locked records out?
So we have the, it depends on how the labels were set up. If you have the labels set up so that any content that's classified with that label goes through disposition review, then the disposition officer has the full authority to dispose of that content at will. So you have that flow. The other thing we have is this concept of inactive user content, where even if the user leaves the company, the data is persisted because of your retention requirements. But it all depends on how it's being aged out. So you have different ways to control how you want to dispose of that data.
So it would be okay to kind of clean up their mailboxes and clean up their OneDrive without worrying that the data somehow disappeared or?
No, yeah. So only the data that is required to be maintained will be preserved, but everything else you can clean up safely.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
I noticed in the demo there was just a limited number of labels available, but what is the user experience of like having hundreds of labels?
Yeah, so we're grappling with some of that with the existing UI, and along with the consolidation efforts that we're doing with MIP, because that's going to bring in a whole lot of additional labels. And so one of the things that we're looking at there is, can we surface all of these labels in different ways? And some of the feedback that we've received from customers are the following. The first one is, I want to have or highlight a set of default labels that I want users in this department to use more commonly than all the other labels which are pure noise. So a default set of labels is one ask. Another one is I want to have a set of preferred labels depending on the type of content that's being created. So if it's a financial document that's being created, then we will have the intelligence to say, okay, show me only the financial labels up front, show me everything else later on. The third thing is where you as the administrator have said, okay, this is the mandatory label or this is the preferred label for this department, and that will automatically percolate to that department. So those are some of the controls we are looking at in terms of exploration. But if the user has the need to pick a specific label out of bounds, he or she will be able to do that via a search experience.
As of right now, it's a scroll through the list.
It's just one flat, long list.
Okay.
Not very usable at all, but with MIT, it's all coming together much better.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Do you think in some time labeling will be available in on-premise SharePoint?
I don't believe so.
At all?
Yeah, but what will be available on premises though is that if a document has been stamped with an online label, that label settings will travel with the document. So if you're concerned about security or privacy or encryption, those controls will be preserved. But if you want to change that label on premises, that's a different story. That won't be.
So I kind of had two parts to a question potentially.
Sure.
First of all, at the moment, or maybe with MIP, is there any ability to have an API available to say, I want this document reference to be given this label?
So we have a couple of ways of doing that. You have the default label capability today. So you can set up a default label at the site library, container, document set, or even folder. So that gives you some level of automation. But I think what you're asking for is that I have a specific document and I want to set the label on the document programmatically. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so what we're doing is, in fact, it should already be available via cSOM, the client object model for SharePoint. We are exposing all of the things that you've seen today in terms of events, asset ID, and even labels, records. All of that will be settable via cSOM.
You'll be able to set the labels?
Yes.
That is a wonderful answer. Thank you very much.
Let me know if you're not seeing it already. It should already be there.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question trying to understand the relationship between labels and file history versioning of a document.
Okay.
Whether it's a document that, let's say it's a contract that, I want to only retain for 2 years, but let's say, a week before that retention, the 2-year retention happens, which is going to be automatically deleted, someone that decides to, open that document, draft it because they're creating a new one, right? So how does that apply? That relationship applies when creating labels, and then at the same time, if you let's say apply a label based on last modify, and the documents modify every month, every 6 months, does it keep keeping copies of those documents? How does that work?
So the way it works today is that if you have a label applied to a document, it applies to all versions, and we have heard customers say that's not right. They want to be able to work on drafts. They want to be able to assign different labels during different phases of the document's life cycle. And once the document has been finalized, they want to be able to say, okay, it's done, it's a record from this point going forward. So right now, we are not very good at dealing with versions, but that's probably changing in the first quarter of next year.
Okay, so it's going to be more of a internal communication that once a document is finalized, that's when the retention period applies, and that's just the way it's going to stay. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? All right, thank you.